behavior. And he talked about times where on the weekend he would drink a lot, and sometimes he would drink and he'd take his boys in the car with him, and drive them around. And his wife was saying, you getting sloshed, you drunk, and you driving your kids in the car. You do that one more time, I'm packing the kids up and we leaving. And he said that was his turning point to where he stopped those type of drinking practices. It was that point, that moment of clarity. And he said he didn't want to be like his father. There's no way in the world he wanted his kids taken away from him. So he reasoned that his wife was right, and he stopped drinking like that and practicing those type of behaviors, for him. Then there's the case of Sean. Sean works as a service attendant at a gas station, to another service attendant, now up at Grosse Pointe. And he's a guy who went to college for a year or so, graphic design, but he stopped going to school, and he had been living with his girlfriend for years, about 7 to 8 years. She had, about 5 kids from a prior relationship, and he was the one that was the father figure for them throughout that time. At some point, his girlfriend, they broke up. But one of the younger sons, who is like stepson, they got really close to him, they both agreed that the younger stepson would stay with him. So he's been raising his stepson for the last 2 years without her. He's there taking care of his stepson. So this idea of these black men not being fathers and not wanting to take on that role, he doesn't have any children of his own, but he has a stepson, and he spends time with him. He lives with him, he takes care of him. But this is what Sean has to say, though. When I was a child, my father was a provider. But then Pop stayed at home a lot because he worked construction, so sometimes he'd be at home cooking and cleaning. He was a provider and a protector. So again, he had been given these different models of what it meant to be a man. When his dad wasn't working on the construction site, he was there cleaning up and being Mr. Domestic. As his mother was, she did painting and things like that. She did work more inside, so she had work all year round. Just different times where his father had downtime, and he did more of the domestic part. So this idea of what a father does. His grandfather was a very supportive part because Sean, his parents divorced too. And he said it was his grandfather that was the constant force and influence in his life. So when dad, didn't come around as much, his grandfather was the man that really showed him a lot of what it meant to be a man, as well as the means what he had of his father when he was there for him. So part of what I'm getting at, part of what comes out, a lot of these men narratives is when men their fathers walked out on them on their lives, that sort of served as an example of what not to do. These men were purposely saying, I'm not going to follow that same model. I'm going to pursue a different path. So again, that's a resiliency, that's a turning point, and it's not because this is all I know, I have to go out and do the same thing. You got men that are actively saying, I'm not going to be that way with mine. And I think that's important to know. So this goes and brings me to the next point. This is a painting from Kahan Wiley. He's from L.A. He's an artist who grew up in the south side of L.A. His dad's from Nigeria. His mom's African-American. They did not stay together long. They had him, and the father left, went back to West Africa, and Kahan was raised by his mother only. So, he grew up in under tough circumstances, but he went on to go to Yale to get his master's in fine art. And he likes to paint pictures of showing African-American men not on the margins, but in the center of things. He says much of the great art in the Renaissance is that the great art is they show white people, men and women, front and center, of the art. And you might have a black person that's serving somewhere on the periphery, but he wanted to show blacks front and center. So that picture, that picture he has there, that was originally Napoleon on a horse. And so he would have this. He went back to L.A. and he asked young men in L.A., look at these artworks. Which one are you most impressed with? Which one do you like the most, identify most with? And one guy he showed he was most identified with the Napoleon pose. So he had the guy placed in that same pose and made the painting about him. So again, this is a way of sort of empowering these men who had originally been seen as people that are on the margins, but how do you see yourself? And that's very important. Move these men from the margins and into the center. I think we sort of do that when we collect the stories of these men and we talk about and we get beyond their public personas and folks that we do too often with this idea of street porn. And this is why I like using behind Wiley's work, because he's definitely doing that. So you get into these ideas, these narratives of resiliency. Okay, during a focus group in Ypsilanti, this was Dr. Miller's work. We had this focus group, and these two guys, Bob and Greg. Bob is a blue-collar guy. He works, does manual labor at some place, high school education or less. Him and his girlfriend live together. They have 2 kids together, and this is the second child that's on the way. And he's describing his relationship with his own father. His statement, this is Bob saying, I never met him, But I saw my daddy one time when I turned 16. That's when he passed. That's the last time I saw him. So basically, I never saw him. So again, like these other men, he's saying he's going to be there for his kids because his father's never there for him. And he feels so empowered and good about being there for his kids. And not one of them to ever feel like what he felt like having a father who was alive, who wasn't blessed with spending time with him. He said he never wanted his kids to experience that. And then you have Greg. Greg is from, I think, Ann Arbor. He went to U of M, Ann Arbor. He's a lawyer, very successful. He's like in his mid-30s, but he's married to his wife. They're having a second kid, and he talks about his relationship with his father. He says, "I wasn't around my father that much, but now when I see him and I'm with my kids, it kills him. It kills him to see me with my kids, and I think because he's thinking about himself, and he kind of sees that how it could have been, and I grew up and how I grew up to be, something. That's what I'm saying. I wasn't in any trouble and stuff like that." So he was a bit bitter about his father, and he says how he's successful because there are father figures in his family, but his father wasn't there. But knowing his dad was alive and had never spent any time with him, they said he never got in trouble, and he was able to go through U of M and become a lawyer and, doing really good for himself. So he's having a second child, and so, again, he wants to be the anti what his father was. And he talks about that in his narrative, and that was really important to Greg. So again, these are sort of narratives of resiliency. And so there's also this idea of, these men were cast in light of caregiver. It's also a caregiver. That's another Kahan Wiley portrait. He asked this young man who did he most identify with the artwork, and he liked the pose of Mary Magdalene. So he had him pose as Mary Magdalene. So again, I thought that fit the idea of caregiver nurturer. I thought that was pretty cool. So narratives of care, okay. Narrative of care came from when I asked the people the question, we asked them, how has the father of the baby been involved with the pregnancy? And people gave different responses to how the father's been involved with the pregnancy. They gave responses like emotional support and health related to medical health. And I'm going to talk about what I mean by medical health. They talked about things like they went to the ultrasound together. That would be medical health. Went to the appointments with them. But when people go to the ultrasound together, prior research has shown that men who go to see their children's ultrasound, that seeing that visual image of the child, that gives them a concrete relationship with the child even before the child is there. And that's one of the things that actually bring them off a lot of times closer to the mother and closer to the child, seeing that ultrasound. So that was the type of medical help they gave. Men talked about, again, going to the doctor visits and things like that. That was one of the categories. Another one was preparing for the baby. And this is very much emotional support for the mother, so they're preparing for the baby. Examples of preparing for the baby was they would say things like, I'm involved with help selecting an obstetrician or selecting a pediatrician. They attend prenatal classes, or they bought the baby, a bassinet, things like that. They go on shopping for the babies. So those are things that they were doing in preparing for the babies. So when you see the fathers and how they're actively planning for the babies, that definitely gives the mother emotional support because she knows this guy is best in this process. He's as gung-ho about it as she is. And then there was this idea of just other forms of emotional support too. And those other emotional support were related to men who started to help out more of the household. So again, as women were advancing her pregnancy, men took on more domestic responsibilities around the household. That was important. They talked about, in terms of helping out the household, they gave answers like, they help make the meals now, or they're doing more with stepping up financially because she has to work less. And he talks about things like he's not coming to the doctor's appointment anymore because he's watching the other children. So when she's at the doctor's appointment, he stays home with the other children so she can go see the doctor. Helping clean up around the house. Those are the type of things about helping out the household more. He cooks more, he cleans more, and he spends time with the other 2-year-old child. A lot of the men talked about spending more time with the older children during the pregnancy. That's how they were helping out with the household. And the other thing was expressing love and affection for the mother and the child. That was another biggie. Expressing love and affection had things like, an expression of love and affection would be things like he rubs her stomach. During the pregnancy, he's been rubbing her stomach. He massages her feet. He's making sure, he says to make sure he watches what she eats. But I put an asterisk next to that. When men come out, they watch what the mother eats, make sure she's not overeating.